Albert Camus writes in Myth of Sisyphus, quote, "There's only one real serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Deciding whether or not life is worth living is to answer the fundamental question in philosophy. All other questions follow from that." So basically, to be or not to be. Do you think there's a truth to that statement? This question of why live at all? Do you think there's truth to that statement being a really, really important question for us to answer?
Yes. Yes.
And what's the answer?
I think the answer is yes. And I think Camus answered it yes too.
Yeah.
You know, I love his writing and you know, I think there was based. How will it be governed? How will criminal infractions be dealt with? When you read or watch sci-fi work as well as if you think about our society beyond Earth, because Mars is murder space.
Yeah, well, I think I have a pretty
way to explore human nature.
So he
humbling
is
picture of that. Maybe so, because we're still not going to be the age that we are. So we imagine colonizing Mars. You have to imagine a first fist fight on Mars. You have to imagine first murder on Mars. Yeah, somebody extraterrestrial affairs on Mars. So it's going to get really homely and boring really fast. You know, it's like only the spacesuits. The other exigencies of living in an atmosphere or lack thereof will limit how badly we can behave on Mars.
But do you think most of the interaction will be still with space orientation? Do you think there'll be? Do you think we're like living through a transformation of a kind, where we're going to be doing more and more interaction in digital space? Like everything we've been complaining about Twitter, is it possible that Twitter is just the early days of a broken system that's actually giving birth to a better working system that's ultimately digital?
And so I read it.
I think we're going to
The essay. I avoided it because
experience a pendulum swing back
and
after weddings are experiencing that now anyway. Just wanting to have face-to-face encounters and spend less time on our phones and less time online. I think maybe everyone isn't going in that direction, but
and I thought I'm not going to be able to.
I do notice it myself, and I notice. I mean, once I got off Twitter, then I noticed the people who were never on Twitter, and then the people who never. And I know I have a lot of friends who were never on
It's
Twitter.
incredible. And so
And they actually never understood what I was doing. It wasn't that they were seeing it and reacting to it, they just didn't know. It's like,
and it means that
it's like being on, I'm not on Reddit either, but I don't spend any time thinking about not being on
and
Reddit.
so,
It's not on
in the
Reddit.
end,
Do you think the pursuit of human happiness is better achieved and more effectively achieved outside of?
So there's this tension, and it means that
Well, I think all we have is our experience. And we have to notice what these various
presents
tools
itself
are doing to us.
as if and he gives these great
It's
examples.
just became very clear to me that
So there's this
it's
tension
unrewarding
along the street.
not to say there isn't some digital platform that's conceivable that would be really useful, but and rewarding, but
And he gives these great examples. You probably remember these.
we just have our life is doled out to us in the moment. We have continually solving this riddle. What is going to suffice to make this moment engaging and meaningful and aligned with who I want to be now and how I want the future to look. We have this tension between being in the present and becoming the future. And seeming paradox is really a paradox. I do think the ground truth for personal well-being is to find a mode of being where
Everything in our lives.
you pay attention to the present moment, meditation by another man. You can pay attention to the present moment with sufficient gravity, and you recognize that consciousness itself, the present, no matter what's happening, is already a circumstance of freedom and contentment and tranquility. You can be happy now before anything else. Before this next desire is gratified, before this next problem is solved. There's this ground truth that consciousness is free and open, unencumbered by really any problem, including getting lost in thought about all the problems that may
So the ability to catch and observe that is essential.
without getting lost in thought. And so what happens haphazardly for people who don't meditate, because they find something in their life that's so captivating, so pleasurable, so it's scary, but scare is captivation. It gets their attention. Whatever, like Sebastian Younger wrote a great book about people's experience in war. And strangely, these are the best experiences they ever had. Everything, only the moment matters. Bullet whizzing by your head, you're not thinking about your 401k or that thing that you didn't say last week to the person you shouldn't have talked about. You're not thinking about Twitter. It's like you're just fully immersed in the present. Meditation is the only way. What I mean by meditation is simply the discovery that there's a way to engage the present moment directly, regardless of what's happening. You don't need to be in a war. You don't need to be having sex. You don't need to be on drugs. You don't need to be surfing. Nothing. That doesn't have to be a peak experience. It can be completely ordinary, but you can recognize that in some basic sense there's only this, and everything else is something you're thinking. You're thinking about the fact. You're thinking about things. And thoughts themselves have no substance. It's fundamentally mysterious that any thought ever really commandeers your sense of who you are and makes you anxious or afraid or angry. And the more you discover that, the half-life of all these negative emotions that blow all of us around get much shorter. Literally, just the anger kept you angry for hours a day.
And that's what you mean by the word anxiety.
The moment it arises, you recognize it. You can decide, at minimum, you can decide whether it's
I think we do have the experience of the presence when they
obviously
in
emotionally is
when
And they would have to realize
yeah,
and that's what you mean by
just
avoiding life.
even the mindful meditative response to this has just happened.
or maybe you feel it in that moment where
The moments where you recognize or not recognize,
when there's
it's not separate.
and it could happen.
This does open up a degree of freedom for a person, but it's not a freedom that gives any motivation to real freedom. It's just a new
somebody else, or maybe
way of being.
you feel it in that moment.
Is there a
But I
difference
think there are
between
moments when
intellectual
maybe it
knowing
feels
the
like
illusion
not
and
reciprocating
Yeah.
the
really
way, or
experiencing
maybe time we were
what's
describing
the
moment
longest you've
when
been able to experience
it's better because doing it kind of
escape
athletic,
one really
or
powerful
watching somebody
way
else.
It's always obvious to me.
understand the life.
But I think there are moments
When
when
I
it
think about
feels
Whenever
like
I'm
it's not
mindful,
like
it's just
the
the
way
term of jargon
how we were
used in
describing
Buddhist increasingly, outside the Buddhist context is mindfulness.
And
But there
one really
are different
powerful
levels
way
of
to
mindfulness,
brain to
different
understand aliveness. There is
degrees of insight into this. But yes, what I'm calling evidence
to think
of
about
lack of
where you
free will,
in my life
like
now
self,
do I
there's two sides
want to kill myself?
a
And
sense of being
you know, whatever the
a
chemistry
subject in the middle of experience, to whom
this question
all experience
is
refers,
a certain kind of
sense of I,
feeling that needs to be developed. There is people
and
where you
that's
look
almost
at
everybody's starting point, right?
and ask,
Start to meditate.
do I
That's
almost say,
always
I
the
want
place
to
people
kill
live
myself, or I don't?
most of their lives from.
Question
I do think that gets interrupted in
and
ways that
that's
get
this
unrecognized.
question.
I think
That's
people
what
are
I'm
constantly
that is,
losing the
that's
sense of
the
I, losing the sense
There
of
is
subject
an
object
actual
distance,
side of that.
but they're not recognizing
I've had someone
it.
say,
And meditation
is say, I want to
the
not suffer
mode
that
in which
kind
you
of question.
can recognize. You
I
can
am
both consciously precipitate it,
that's
look for the
chemistry,
self,
that's
and
what
fail to find
that
it,
is, that's chemistry.
and recognize its absence.
And then from the other side of that,
That's just the flip side of the
that's
coin of free will.
Joy's been very fortunate.
The feeling of having free will is what it feels like to feel like a self who's thinking his thoughts, doing his actions, tending his intentions.
refrigeration.
I don't know, a man in the middle of the boat is rowing.
I can't deep enjoy for often.
That's the false
As
start.
you're
You're
saying,
fine if there's no one in the middle of the boat.
drinking anything and it's cold.
In fact, there's no boat,
Cold
it's just
things
the river.
that
Just
the
flow of experience.
refrigeration.
There's no center to it. There's no place from which you can control it. And even when you're doing things, this does not negate the nature, voluntary and involuntary behaviors. It's like,
That is,
I can voluntarily reach
with my
it,
breath,
but
that this
when I'm
got
paying
me
attention,
real,
I'm aware that
embracing
everything's just happening. Just the intention to move is just
arising.
And
And
I'm in no position to know why it didn't rise a moment before, or a moment later, or a moment, or you know, 50% stronger or weaker, so as to be ineffective, to be doubly effective, flourish for it versus move slow. Not, I can never run the counterfactual. I can never. All of this opens the door to an even more disconcerting picture along the same lines, which is, subsumes this conversation about free will, and it's the question of whether
it just reminds me of
anything is ever possible.
What if I die? I don't know
What if,
that's
that's the question. I
contemplating.
haven't thought a lot about it, but it's been a few years that I've been kicking this question around.
Possibility that this is my ride that way.
So what if only the actual
how amazing life
is possible?
That's
What if there was, do we live with this feeling of possibility? Live with the sense that
I am
take so I have two daughters, and we could have had a third child. So what does it mean to say in that? You don't have kids, I don't
find that so the possibility might be
right. So what do we mean when we say could have a child, or you might have a child in the future? Like what is the space in reality? What's the relationship between possibility and actuality and reality? Is there a reality in which non-actual things are nonetheless real? And so we have other categories of non-concrete things that don't have spatial, temporal dimension that nonetheless exist. So, the integers, numbers. There's a reality, there's an abstract reality, numbers, and this is philosophically interesting to think about these things. So they're not, in some sense, they're real, and they're not merely invented by us. They're discovered because they have structure that we can't suppose that. It's not like they're not fictional characters like Hamlet and Superman. Also exist in some sense, but they exist at the level of fiction and abstraction. But it's like they're true and false statements we can make about Hamlet. They're true and false statements we can make about Superman. Because our fiction, the fictional worlds we've created, and it's all abstract. It's all abstractable from any of its concrete situations. It's not just in a comic book, it's just in a movie. It's in our, ongoing ideas about these characters. But natural numbers, the integers don't function quite that way. I mean, they're similar, but they also have a structure. It's purely a matter of discovery. It's not, you can't just make it up whether numbers are prime. Now, you give me two integers, certain size, basically mention two enormous integers. If I were to say, okay, well, between those two integers, there are exactly 11 prime numbers. That's a very specific point about which I can write about whether or not anyone knows. There's a domain of facts there. These are abstract reality. They relate to some way that's philosophically interesting. Metaphysics to
this gets focused
what we call real reality. Spatial, temporal, but possibility, because in my view, occupies a different space. This is something, again, my thoughts on this was pretty forward. I need to talk to a philosopher of physics and a physicist about how this may interact with things like
Yeah, like that's an interesting, right, exactly. So I wonder if discoveries in physics like further prove more concrete proof that many Moore's interpretation of quantum mechanics has validity, and that completely starts to change things.
But even that's just more actuality. So if I took that seriously, that's a case of, and because that happens even if
I think that's
that isn't true, but just imagine you have a physically infinite universe. The implication of infinity is such that things will begin to repeat themselves. The farther you go in space, head out in one direction, and then you're going to meet two people just like us having a conversation just like this, and you're going to meet them a certain number of times. Every variety of permutations slightly different. Infinity is just so big that our intuition and probability completely break down. So what I'm suggesting is maybe probability isn't a thing. Maybe there's only some kind of actuality. Maybe there's only what happens. And at every point along the way, our notion of what could have happened or what might have happened is just that. It's just thought work. What could happen or might happen.
There's some kind of imaginative thing, almost like a greatest absurdity. That's where that possibility exists. That comes from that like this kind of
and possibility itself is a kind of spooky idea. It too has a sort of structure. Right, so like, if I'm going to say,
not just about what you're talking about, kind of watch action, but also what do you become the reverse? Like this
could have
kind
had a daughter.
of idea that the
Last
waking
year's
world experience, the experience, right?
So I'm saying that's possible.
You want to
But not actual. That is a claim. The things that are true and not true about that daughter. It has a kind of structure. It's like,
I feel like there's a lot of fallout around this very well. That the possibility, it feels like things would be useful for him.
well, what does it mean to like, what does it mean to say,
You gotta like.
I just did that, but I must say, to people that I wouldn't have, it's possible that I just do this, yeah, but I might not have done it.
You're taking it very temporally close to the original, like what appears a decision to deal with.
Whenever we're saying something's possible, but not actual, like this thing just happened, but it's possible that it wouldn't have happened differently.
Albert Camus writes in Mythicists.
Where is that? What is, for that to be real, for the possibility to be real, what claim are we making about
Isn't that an extension of the idea that free will is an illusion that only has actuality, possibilities?
Yeah, I'm just extending it beyond this goes to physics. We're always telling ourselves a story that includes possibility.
Possibility is really compelling for somebody.
Yeah, well, because this could sound just academic, but every backward-looking regret or disappointment, and every forward-looking worry is completely dependent on this notion. Every regret is based on something else. Every disposition to worry about the future is based on feeling this range of possibilities to go either way. And, whether or not there's these possibilities, worry is almost never psychological. Reality is at any given moment, either you can do something to solve the problem you're worried about or not. So if you can do something, just do it. And if you can't, you're worrying, it's just causing you to suffer twice over. You're going to get the medical procedure next week anyway. How much time between now and next week are you going to spend worried about it? The worry doesn't accomplish it.
How much do physicists think is possible?
Well, I think about it in terms of probability more often, but probability just describes. Again, this is a place where I might be out of my depth and need to talk to somebody debunk this, but but probability seems just describes the pattern of actuality that we can observe. Right? There's certain things to observe. Those are the actual things that happen. And we have this additional story about probability. We have the frequency with which things happen and happen in the past. To flip a fair coin, and I know in the abstract that I have a belief that in the limit those flips, those tosses should converge on 50% heads and 50% tails. I know I have a story as to why it's not going to be exactly 50% within any arbitrary time frame. But in reality, all we ever have is sort of tosses. And then we have an additional story that, well, it came up heads, but it could have come up tails.
He reciprocated everything. I was doing 5 ball groceries one week, he back the next. Like he was a straight shooter. You could trust him.
And what do we claim is true about the physics of things if we say it could be otherwise?
I
I dove
think
very
we're
deeply
claiming
into
that
the shadow
probability is
in
true.
a chapter in my last book, The
That
Laws
it
of
just
Human
it
Nature.
allows us to
And I try and talk
have
about
a nice
how
model
life
of what
integrates the shadow
is
because
called
it's
probability.
not an easy
It seems
answer.
that possibility has to be somewhere.
But I have this dark side.
It's a little bit like what's happening with the laws of nature.
How a lot of your
There's something metaphysically interesting about the laws of nature too, because the laws of nature impose their work on the world, right? We see
They
their
have that
evidence,
aggressiveness when you were young,
but
and it got
they're not
socialized
reducible
out of you,
to any
and it got
specific set of
repressed.
instances.
And it's
Right.
like a
So there's
lost
some structure
self
there.
inside me to speak.
But the structure
How do you
isn't
integrate it?
just a
And
matter of
so
the actual
main
thing.
is
I mean, the actual building involves them banging into each other.
can't run away from it.
All of that actuality can be explained by what actual things are actually doing. But then we have this notion that in addition to that, we have the laws of nature that are making, they're explaining this activity. But how are the laws of nature an additional thing in addition to just the actual things that are actually in fact causes? And if they are additional things, how are they affected? If they're not among the actual things, they're just actually banging around. And so to some degree,
That's possibilities in hiding somewhere. The laws of nature can be
possible.
possible. Closet somewhere, I'm sure. Where all the possibilities could be. But you don't think many worlds is that?
That's a good rule.
Because many worlds still exist.
We're in this strand so still you have just the local instance of what is active. And then if it proliferates elsewhere where you can't be affected by it, then you're more out of well.
Their answer, and this was all perfectly correct.
And so many worlds are just made of
competitive games. What did we play?
basically everything that can happen
First of all,
happens somewhere.
I studied Piaget.
A hockey
game is
maybe that's not entirely kosher formulation of it, but
everybody plays basketball.
but there's whatever happens.
Plays hockey. So that's
In fact, there's relativistically,
you
there's
have to cooperate. Like if you're the star, you never
Einstein's
pass, you just
original
outside
notion of
the bench,
a block
you're not the
universe.
star.
Yeah.
So there's
It's
tremendous
been a while since I've been in a conversation like this, so sort of got a chance to ask and understand this concept of physics currently. I don't hear it discussed much, but the idea of a block universe is
Disgusting.
It is. It's
space-time exists as a totality, in our sense that we are traveling.
That's kind of where a lot of young people end up. They enter the
Real
world
difference between
where
fast
they
and
conquer,
furious.
they think that they're
But that's an illusion
winners
to
for
start.
everyone. It's, it's just win-win situations. And that's what they're really
Which
shocked
fights
by.
were taken with this large
So all this
but on
confidence, this
some
idea
level,
that it doesn't have to be
it's like, you're reading a
you don't have
novel,
to get
the
prizes
last
for
page of the
first
novel
place.
exists just as much as the first page.
Prize. All you
You
can
can
be
be
is
in the middle of
sitting
it.
next to your children for massive shocked when they enter the world and they see that it's not like that.
Yeah, then they get disillusioned and depressed, or traumatized. I mean, when my son's hockey team in his school, they won the city championship, which was a big deal, and the school was pretty happy about that, to his credit, so was the coach, but the principal, he was this authoritarian empath. She was an awful person, I thought.
Authoritarian empath?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's she
I like
had
that.
virtue as a club. Yeah, well, there's plenty of those people around.
Yeah,
She said, well, really today we're all winners. And the coach had that. Yeah, exactly. It is sickening because my son was just appalled by it, but the coach had enough guts. He said, no, the hockey team won. It's not like the kids in the school were jealous. Some of them were, obviously, but most of them were really happy, like you are when your sports team wins. And most people are generous enough so that they're able to celebrate someone else's victory without. And that's the same. I saw this with birthday parties. I just bloody well hated this. It's like, well, every child gets a gift bag. It's like, no, they have their damn birthday. Every child doesn't need a damn gift bag. And this is the same naive treat me. And it's authoritarian too, because it imposes this kind of view of the world. It's like, no, it's this kid's data. Be special. That's why we're so look at this kid. The rest of them, if they can't take that, it's like there's something wrong with the way that they've been treated and attended to.
Well, a lot of my books, I try to remove the kind of taboo or the negative associations we have with the word like power or with the word ambition. I try and say ambition is a good thing. It means that you believe in yourself, you have some self-love, and you believe you're worth something, and you want to go out and achieve and create something worthwhile for other people. So ambition is a positive thing. But so many people are just kind of embarrassed about being human beings, embarrassed about our primate nature, embarrassed about our own aggressive impulses.
This is partly why boys are failing in our schools now, the disproportionate rate, And I say it was an assault of the sort that you're describing on the better part of striving masculinity. And, I had a friend who killed himself because he identified his ambition with, the patriarchal force that's devouring the environment, let's say, and it's the cause of historical horror. And you might say, well, no one takes that onto themselves to that degree, and that's, well, you can say that, but you just don't know what the hell you're talking about. People take that onto themselves all the time. And then they start to identify the best part of them that strives forward with the destructive impulses of humanity, and they're so ashamed because they can't do anything good. But in principle, he tried to be as inoffensive and harmless in every possible way as he possibly could, and it just sucked all the life out of him.
You end up turning that aggressive energy on yourself is what ends up happening. That's maybe leads to suicide, the ultimate kind of self-aggression. I know that I personally have, as I said, I definitely have a shadow side. I'm very aggressive and extremely competitive, and I have a lot of anger. So a lot of those experiences in my youth made me very angry. But the way I kind of integrated my shadow, I'm not saying this is a model, but the way I integrated it was through my books. Yeah. So that anger kind of seeps through the material that I write, and I find I can only write when I have that kind of anger. But I don't rant, I don't yell and kind of
Albert Camus writes in Myth of Sisyphus, quote, "There's only one real serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Deciding whether or not life is worth living is to answer the fundamental question in philosophy. All other questions follow from that." So basically, to be or not to be.